are you? Hey, good. How are you? Hey. How are you? Hey. Hey, how's it? How are you, buddy?
Not bad, huh?
Anyways, that's really interesting what you were saying to me, Hudson.
Yeah. I mean, I learned about it just yesterday.
Cool.
Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. Looks like Aiden can't come. His parents won't let him. There's supposed to be a monster or something out in the streets.
A monster?
A monster?
What?
Halloween.
Jeez. Well, alright. Anyways, thanks for coming. What we'll be doing here today is our second edition of MCS Terror Tales, inspired highly by regular show. So we've each prepared terror tales with ourselves as the characters, and we will be sharing them. So we hope you enjoy. So who's going first?
I'll go first.
Alright.
All right. We're going to start off with my story, The Museum. Hey, Hudson, what's with this place anyways? Hudson turned around from shotgun seat of Nick's car to face Joe, Aiden, and Katrina, who were crammed in the back. They were cruising through a desolate town, trying to find their destination based on Hudson's directions. I already told you, man. It's my uncle's museum. He wants us to watch it tonight, to make sure no kids egg the place. But it's Halloween, Joe whined. You weren't going to go trick-or-treating anyways. Now we get to spend the spookiest night of the year in an old Gothic church, Katrina said with her hands up, mimicking a zombie movie. That doesn't sound much better. I mean, how did your uncle even come to own a church? Joe asked. I don't know, but it's a museum now, Hudson responded bluntly, before turning around to continue giving questionable directions to Nick. Something large fluttered past the windshield, bringing all attention to the front of the car, and suddenly Nick asked, Is that it up ahead? Sitting at the end of the sparsely filled street was a giant Gothic church. Yeah, I think it is, Hudson said, as Joe and Aiden fought to crane their necks forwards for a full view of the place. It was a huge church, complete with many pointed arches and lots of stained glass. Did I mention that my uncle's also into stained glass? The museum is really more of a side hobby, says Hudson. Not until now, pointed out Katrina as they slowly drove by a full stained glass depiction of Jesus on the cross. Well, we're here, said Nick, stepping out of the car. They all piled out and stopped for a moment, staring up in awe at the sheer magnitude of the building. It looks like the entrance is over there, Aiden said as he shuffled over to a door on the side of the building. Hudson used the key he had been given to unlock it, and in they went. Immediately, a dark air was present. They found a light switch and turned it on, lighting up the place under a row of dim candles. They explored the hall, and upon turning a bend, walked into the main section of the converted church. It had extremely high ceilings and large stained glass murals near its top that let in some of the moonlight. The main area was filled with pieces of art, paintings, drawings, sculptures, and everything was mostly of people or bugs. The floor was decorated like a maze, with every turn leading to a different place or piece. This place is filled with art. How did your uncle get all this stuff? Asked Joe. Well, I think it's more of a gallery than a museum, but that's what he calls it, Hudson answered. So all this stuff is for sale then? Aiden prodded, picking up a glass-blown frog. Most of it, said Hudson. The group set up in the second-floor balcony, which was the only thing that stood above the maze of art. They played video games, told stories, and ate candy until Hudson suddenly stood up. Oh no! I forgot to turn on the front lights! I have to go turn them on so people don't come by and think the place is empty. I'll join too, said Aiden. Me too, Joe pitched in. We'll be back in a minute, so you guys can just stay here, Hudson offered to Nick and Katrina, who accepted and carried on with what they were doing. The three of them went down the stairs and to the front doors, which were much bigger than the entrance they had taken. Say, Hudson, why didn't we just come in that way? Joe asked. I didn't think these doors open anymore, he said as he tried flickering the light switch on and off. No lights shone through the glass of the front doors, and Aiden piped up. I think the fuse must be blown here, because if you look around, the other lights surrounding the door, they aren't on either. He was pointing around to several electric candles, and they were indeed out. Well, what should we do? Hudson asked. Do you know where the fuse box is? Well, this is my uncle's place, and I don't come here that often. Is there a basement? Joe asked. Yeah, and the door's right over there. Hudson gestured towards a big metal door with knight's armor positioned on either side of it. All right, well, let's go, Aiden said, starting off. Oh, man, I don't want to go into the dark and scary church basement, Joe said. But the other two carried on, so he followed, the iron door closing swiftly behind them. Meanwhile, Nick and Katrina stopped playing video games. I'm going to find the bathroom around here, Katrina said as she stood up and headed down the stairs. Hudson said he'd be back in a minute. You could probably just wait, Nick said, but she was already out of earshot. He stood up and walked over, leaning on the balcony. There he could see Katrina trying to find her way through the maze and to the other side. He laughed as she walked into a few dead ends, but watched as she turned a corner and disappeared. He waited a moment to see if she would come back into sight, but the hall was rather dark, and he didn't see her again. He scratched his head and walked down the stairs until he came face to face with the maze. Where is everyone? He mumbled as he looked around. Hudson, Aiden, and Joe were nowhere to be found, and the same could be said for Katrina. Nick decided to try his luck by exploring the two halls that ran parallel to the main room. In the basement, the search for the breaker box was beginning to seem futile. This is a massive basement, and the box could be in any one of these side rooms, Joe said, putting up his hands. I'm not sure a breaker box would be in a damp stone basement anyways, but we should probably keep looking in here if we want to find it, Aiden said. They continued opening wooden doors into small rooms with nothing more than art supplies or old clothes in them, until they came to a halfway point of the basement. Joe came flying out of a room, slamming the door behind him. Hudson, man, there's a bunch of bugs in that room. Oh yeah, this is an art, stained glass, and bug museum. Down here's just where my uncle keeps the bugs when he's not around. Hudson seemed nonchalant about it, but Joe's fears were not quelled, and Aiden seemed a little dismayed. This is just getting weirder. Let's just find this box already, Aiden sighed. They kept flipping open doors and finding habitats with large bugs of all type. They seemed to get bigger the further they worked into the floor. Back on the surface, Nick had looped all the way around and found the bathroom, but saw no sign of Katrina. There was no way she beat him back to the balcony without him noticing, and he figured he'd head back up that way. When just as he was passing in front of the art, he heard her yelling. He didn't know what was going on. He called out to her, and when he didn't hear her again, he tried to follow her steps into the maze. He was bolting around, running into dead end after dead end, until he stopped, seeing that one of the dividing walls was another stained glass mural. He could see through it, and on the other side was something scuttling around, coming in his direction, so he hid behind a painting next to the glass. He was peeking out from behind the painting, and as soon as the thing was gone, he stood up to continue on his path. Right as he turned, his heart skipped a beat because Katrina was standing inches away from him. Jesus, have you been hiding in here this whole time just to scare me? Nick was still reeling from what he had seen. Yeah, I was wondering when you'd come in here, she said. I'm actually pretty lost, though, so I'm kind of hoping you know the way out. Unfortunately, I don't, and it's hard to see anything with the clouds covering the moonlight, so I guess we'll just have to try and get out. They started to walk for a minute before Nick asked, Have you seen any of the others in here? No, why? She said. It's just that I have no idea where they are, and I thought I saw someone in here, but I guess not. Yeah, I've been in here for a while, and I haven't seen anyone else, so they're probably just up on the balcony or something. The two of them continued to try and work their way out of the maze, using the ceiling as judgment for how close they were to escaping. But it almost seemed like some of the ceiling features were shifting. Below them, Hudson, Joe, and Aiden had finally found the room where the breaker box must have been. Look, man, I'm not going into a room that has a giant danger sign on it, Joe insisted. Come on, man, it's got an electricity sign too, It's probably just because the stone lets in so much water through the ground that Hudson's uncle doesn't want the wires to be flooded, Aiden says. See, that right there is a great reason for me not to enter the room. Entering scary rooms is totally against my code of ethics, Joe said. If you think it'll be okay, then I guess we could go in, Hudson said, disregarding Joe. Aiden nodded and turned the doorknob, cracking the door open slowly. It revealed a larger room, bigger than all the other offshoots, and filled with gear. What is all this stuff? Joe asked, standing outside the doorway, peeking in. It looks like bug-catching stuff. I mean, here's a giant net, and that's got to be a big habitat, Aiden said as he pointed to the dim section of room that was divided by a huge glass panel. But I don't know what that is, he continued. Hudson chimed in. I think it's a pinning table, like where my uncle pins up the dead bugs. Before any of them got too good of a look at the big wooden table with tools hanging all around it, Hudson called out, "Hey, I think that's the box over there." Him and Aiden headed into the corner, where sure enough, the breaker box could be found. As Aiden opened it and started flipping switches, Joe crept through the door, getting a closer look at the enclosure that took up more than half the room. There wasn't much in it, but he couldn't see very far because it was dark. One of the switches Aiden flicked turned on a light on the wall behind the glass, and suddenly, an indistinguishable lump turned out to be a huge, green, menacing bug. It started shrieking to get away from the light, and turned its two basketball-sized eyes to face Joe and the other two who had heard all the commotion and turned around. It stood up, and stretching its thick forearms and small, spindly legs. Then it scuttled along the floor to the glass, biting with giant pinchers and banging at the panel, revealing a hole burrowed in the ground beneath where it laid. It was bigger than anyone in the room, and it was angry, shrieking and wailing as it pounded on the glass. "What is that thing?" Joe yelled. "It's so big it's going to break through the glass," Aiden yelled back. The three of them sprinted out of there as the glass shattered behind them. They were running as fast as they could, but the huge insect stopped to clear the doorway before scuttling at an alarmingly high rate of speed, its pincers clacking and legs scuffing across the stone floor in pursuit of them. When Hudson turned his neck to see it, he noticed it had many rows of sharp teeth within its throat, which was open to produce the horrible, deafening noise. Upstairs, Katrina thought she heard a noise from below, and was annoyed that they couldn't find their way out of the maze. So she started yelling, "Joe, Aiden, Hudson, where are you guys? Get us out of here." "What are you doing? You can't yell right now," Nick said, trying to stop her. "What do you mean? We're the only ones in here, and I want to get out." "I think there's something else in here, and I don't want to call it here," Nick said frantically. "What are you talking about? We're the only ones here." She stopped, only to belt out again, but when her yell rang silent, she spoke again. "See?" For a moment, Nick believed her, but then he heard thrashing coming from the other side of the wall they were near. "Something's breaking all the art over there. What's going on?" Katrina said. Suddenly, a scuttling noise picked up, and a huge green head poked through the painting behind them, crushing its surroundings. Nick and Katrina were eye to eye with one of the monster bugs when it opened its mouth to let out a horrible shrieking noise and began clacking its pincers on its face. The two of them screamed before taking off in a sprint, disappearing around one of the corners. "We gotta get out of here," Nick yelled, and Katrina said, "Do you think it got the others?" He didn't answer, but their sprint led them to a dead end of the maze, and the walls behind them were being thrown out of the way, disregarded by the giant bug, whose snapping face was getting steadily closer. Quickly, Nick pulled a golf club out of the hands of a piece titled "Golfing Man" and smashed the stained glass in front of him. They dashed through it, busting through the walls of the maze until they were pressed up against a real wall. They had nowhere to go, but Katrina spotted a piece called "Hunting Woman" that was a papier-mâché woman holding a real wooden crossbow, and she did the obvious. As soon as Katrina plucked the crossbow from her hands, she spun around and saw the giant bug cascading through the wall. Nick was swinging at it with the golf club, trying to fend it off, but to no avail. Quickly, Katrina sighted the beast and pulled the trigger, shooting the bug right in the eye. "Bullseye," she said, as Nick grabbed her, dragging her past the flailing, crying monster. It stumbled around behind them, but toppled over when it tried to spin around. Nick and Katrina were already dashing towards the front door when Joe, Aiden, and Hudson came bursting out of the basement door. "Block the door!" Aiden yelled as the three of them pressed up against it, trying to barricade it shut. "Where have you guys been?" Katrina yelled. "Running from a giant bug," the three of them called out. "Help us block this door," Hudson said, so the other two came rushing over. "We fought one of the bugs," Nick said, pressing up against the door. "And I shot it." Katrina held up her crossbow. "What's going on here, Hudson?" Aiden asked. "I've got no idea," he tried to spit out. "Look, we have to get back to the car," Joe said. At this moment, the one-eyed bug from earlier came scuttling around the corner and shrieked at the group. "He's still alive! I thought you killed him!" Joe yelled. Suddenly, the basement bug started ramming the door. Aiden looked around nervously before saying, "That one's closing in. We should just make a break for the car and take the weapons off these knights here." He nodded at the statues next to them that were indeed armed. "All right, let's go," Katrina agreed. They all dashed away from the door, Aiden grabbing an axe and Joe grabbing a sword. The two bugs began chasing them as they went down the hall, roaring and shrieking the whole way. The group was beating feet, about to make it to the door, when another big bug jumped down from the ceiling. "There's another one?" Joe cried out. The group had no time to stop, and instead charged right for the third beast, Katrina firing a crossbow bolt, Aiden, Joe, and Nick all collectively beating on its legs and arms. As Hudson opened the door, the bug swung at them and knocked them all back into the wall, but now they were even closer to the door, so the group picked up and fled through it. Hudson fumbled with the key for a moment, locking the door behind them as they all piled into the car, and Nick peeled out of there, spraying dirt as he took off. Just as they thought they were going to get away, out through the stained glass Jesus mural burst the one-eyed bug with big, thin wings that pulled away from its body, fluttering to chase them. Everyone in the car was screaming, and as it was about to swoop down on the speeding car, until Katrina rolled down the window, leaned out, and said, "Not this time, bug," and shot out its other eye. The bug fluttered, shrieked some more, and plummeted right into the pavement before them, where the car went straight through its midsection, turning the bug into a big pile of green mush. Reports of missing people in the area skyrocketed in the following weeks, but the group was safe, resting and recovering in their homes from the traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Really good.
That was
All
wicked
right.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want a part 2. I want to hear about the missing persons reports.
Yeah.
Anyone want something to drink?
No, I'm all good.
I'm
Thanks.
Oh, I'm good, man.
Fine, but thanks though.
Anyways, I can't believe Aiden really didn't come. It's not like there's actually a monster out there.
Oh, dude. His parents must be paranoid or something.
So Hudson, you're up next, right?
Yep. My story is called The Trampoline Tournament.
Alright.
After picking me up one day in the middle of October, Joe told me that last night Nick had gotten into an accident on the trampoline and hasn't been seen since. "Look, there he is! There's Nick!" I shout to Joe, as Nick is walking along the sidewalk eating a sandwich made of clearly non-gluten-free bread. "Holy shit," Joe says, stomping on the brakes. He continued to walk down the sidewalk with a turn of his head as we drove by. "Nick, where have you been? You missed your morning shift at the movie theater," Joe said, slowly driving next to him. Nick didn't say anything. He just stared at us. His eyes were bloodshot, looking like he hadn't slept for days. Weird sounds were coming from as we stopped and got out of the car. We opened the door to the back of the car and said, "You should probably get in." And I looked back at Joe, who was also looking at me, and like we just had saw something crazy. As we continued down the road, Nick began speaking. I told Katrina to meet us at our house. He said, "For the trampoline tournament, right?" Joe questioned. "Yeah. We had been planning this for some time. I'm just curious why he wanted me to bring all my belongings," I answered. We pulled in not too much longer after discussing this, and Nick, out of the blue, said, "Parents are gone for the weekend. They took the dogs as well, including the cat." Nick said, "That's strange, but we don't have to worry about letting them out now, do we?" Joe said after getting out of the car, seeing Katrina's car already parked. "Sup? I brought James along as well. I hope that's fine." Katrina said with her car stuffed to the brim. "Also all my belongings like you said me to." I got the feeling that something was off, but sort of shrugged it off. James is here? That's too many, Nick yelled angrily, raising his voice. Dude, chill out, Joe said to Nick. I blanked out, just staring in shock at Nick. Come on, he could be the referee of the tourney. Katrina cut in, pulling out a huge box that read bread on it. I made this for whoever wins. Everyone went silent and looking at the seemingly glowing aura around the box that had bread in it. Nick looked at the box as his pupils dilated. After continuing on with our night, I kept looking back at Nick. We just stood there and was very quiet until it was dark out. Joe was talking. Then I said, it's the trampoline tournament, Nick blurts out, cutting him off. I jumped with an alarmed sense. It came out of nowhere, that shocked with what he had said. Okay, let's go then, I said excitedly, frankly, a bit too optimistic than I should be. Nick, Joe, Katrina, and I went on the trampoline. As we jumped in sync, suddenly Nick shouted, James, you should jump in the center. Guys, I don't think this is a good idea, James, Katrina's younger brother, exclaimed as he looked around. The trampoline bounce pad was nearly touching what seemed to be right below. Climb on, Nick yelled at him. James scurried up the side and jumped in the middle. He began to jump. We sent James higher and higher. Each jump felt like we're going to break through the ground. I looked down and saw there was a giant pit below the trampoline. I just didn't feel like commenting about it. We continued to jump, getting the ever-scared James higher and higher until he reached taller than the trees. A looming metallic sound played as earth-shattering darkness grew over the trampoline. We all looked up. Watching this dark void fill the space, there was a large light appearing out of the sky in the middle, with silhouetted shadows appearing in the light surrounding the edges. All of our eyes dilated, and Nick smiled. James was sent up and abducted into the UFO. He screamed as he was sucked into the light. We all continued to jump as we were all hypnotized by the light. We all just jumped in awe as Nick pushed us each one by one. Joe first, being taken up into the light, he screamed, "Help!" as he was dragged up into the sky. We were all too entranced to stop jumping, as we lost the chance to save him. Katrina was up next, jumping in sync, being sent higher and higher by Nick and I's jumping. Katrina was dragged into the sky as she reached the treetops. She let out a scream as the void disappeared when she reached the light. As the light left, I fell out of my trance. I shook my head, refocusing on what was happening in the moment. Before I knew it, I fell right through the trampoline. The pit below was cushioned by one lump. It felt like it had mass to it. It seemed almost too dark to see. I heard scuttling. I see the Nick from the trampoline crawling around the inside of the tunnel on the sides. His jaw elongated and detached from his actual body. A huge bite was taken out of my neck. I winced. Little did I know, all my blood was taken. I was woke up in a void, and I looked to the right of me. There was Nick playing Super Smash Bros. Where are we? I asked frantically. The void. I assume you were taken in too then, Nick asked with no seemingly fear or worry in the world. Taken by what? Don't question it. We have no worries in this floating world. I'll grab a second controller, I asked. And then Nick said, word. Out of nowhere, the box of bread appeared, opening up to reveal a bread crown, which was placed upon Nick's head. The end.
Oh my god. That was such a good story. It's hysterical. That was really funny, but it was also like really unique. Yeah. It's like, I don't see any of that coming.
At no point did I know where that was going at all.
Dude, saying he said to bring all of his belongings.
Oh, hold on, guys. I'm getting a call from James. What? What are you talking about? Okay, well, just go somewhere safe. Guys, James just told me there was a car at the town hall, shredded up. He said something about a monster, but I don't... That's all. And then then I told him to get somewhere safe, and then he hung up.
Monster?
I don't know. I'm kind of concerned now.
Well, is he alright?
I mean, he called me, and I told him to get somewhere safe, and he said okay, but... I mean, so I'm assuming he's going to go somewhere.
Let's quell the nerves by going on to our next story.
I mean, there can't really be a monster anyways. There's nothing we can do about it.
They don't exist.
So let's move on. Katrina, I think you're up next.
My story is called Ferris Wheel of the Midwest. It was a crisp fall day and nothing seemed out of place. The leaves were crunchy and the pumpkins were carved and primed. I had just gotten out of school for the day, and man, was I excited. I was meeting up with my friends, Hudson, Joe, and Nick. We had planned to go to the town's Halloween festival. It was the classic fall fest. There were gluttonous food options, shaky rides, and of course, scary decorations. As I laid inside, waiting for the time to pass, I dozed off for a nap, and had woken up to a jolt and a chill in my spine. I had thought nothing of it and just shook it off. However, my eyes glanced at the clock. Shit! It was 15 minutes before I was supposed to meet everyone at 6 o'clock. I quickly raced to get dressed and grab my backpack. There was nothing in it, of course. I just like having a backpack. I sped in my car to the fairgrounds, getting there just at 6. Naturally, as I could have expected, Nick, Joe, and Hudson were 15 minutes late. They were always 15 minutes late for everything. However, we paid the small fee together and entered the fair. I was instantly greeted with a cart that offers deep-fried cheesecake. I had to pass, but Joe said, I'll take a slice. As we walked around, admiring the hay bales and scarecrows, I had this inkling that something was off. I just credited it to waking up in such a rush. We entered the part of the fair with the game booths and rides. After successfully avoiding paying for the rigged games, we stopped to recuperate. Would you guys want to go on the Ferris wheel? Hudson questioned. I was never one for Ferris wheels, and as far as I could remember, neither were Nick and Joe. However, we always skipped the rides at the fairs, and we thought, might as well. Although, this Ferris wheel had an in-date inspection sticker on it, suggesting that it could be trusted. It was dark now. There were spotlights and floodlights that kept the fair illuminated to the eye. However, even though visibility was lower, I still realized I was paying $15 for a ticket to the Ferris wheel. Guys, let's all get into separate carriages, because we're all so shredded the weight can be more distributed, Joe exclaimed. That's facts. I am ripped, I agreed. Sure, as am I, said Nick. As we ventured into a different car, the carny started up the machine and the eerie music had slowly wound up and started playing. I had never been on a Ferris wheel, so I do not know how long it lasted, but regardless, I was nearing the top. I was able to see the beauty of our home state, Ohio, and the rugged wilderness that comes with it. Everyone was only 2 carriages behind me, and I started to leave the top. I looked up to see that Joe was not in his carriage. That's weird. I could have sworn he got in that one, I thought to myself. My car lowered some more. I would be seeing Nick now at any time. He got in right after Joe. Again, Nick's car spun to the top and there was no one inside. What? That can't possibly be right. Where is Nick now? I said out loud this time, with an anxious tone. I was nearing the bottom now. The last person to be seen was Hudson. Just like that, Hudson's car rolled around and no one was in it. I need to get off this ride right now, I yelled. I tried opening the door at the bottom. The carny informed me that the ride will end when it ends, and I paid $15, so I should shut up and enjoy it. Anxious, scared, and a little bit delirious, the carriage continued upwards. I was like a dog in a cage, pacing back and forth, trying to find my friends on the stupid ride. No luck. My carriage hit the bottom and the door opened. The ride was over. I blinked and took a look at my surroundings. I was not in the same place as I was before. This was the same carnival, but this was not the same carny operating the ride. There were no lights. The place was a dark wasteland. There did not seem to be any sign of human life. There was just an old decaying knick-knack booths and a rotting food smell. I turned around to the only person I knew, the carny. He wasn't there. It was a different carny now. My heart dropped and my senses turned to overload. I did not know where I was, when I was, or who I was. I had forgotten how I even got to the festival. Who are the people I came with? Do I drive? Do I have a house? Am I homeless? The questions raced through my mind. Fuck. I messed up. Okay. The questions raced through my mind. I started sprinting. I ran until I found the exit, a broken blinking sign that looked more like an entrance, oddly enough. I entered it. All of a sudden, I woke up. I was on the same couch that I fell asleep on the day before. Wait, how did I remember I slept on this couch? What just happened? I spoke out loud. I stood up. My legs felt like they have not been used in decades. I struggled to walk to the front door. I heard a sharp knock on the wood. Someone was there. I opened the door, and there stood Joe, Hudson, and Nick. Are you ready to go to the fair? They all spoke simultaneously in an eerie tone. I'm not going to no damn fair, I answered back sharply. Wait, why did I sound like that all of a sudden? My voice was shaky and I sounded old. I glanced to the left, and there stood a dusty mirror. My God, I looked like I was 100 years old. I passed out at the sight. I woke up again as I was being dragged on the Ferris wheel as long as my friends. Oh, I thought they were my friends at least. No, I don't want to pay $15 again, I screamed. This Ferris wheel started up. Although I was crying, no one seemed to care, and I got to the top and was met with a sense of familiarity. Oh, thank God. This is Ohio, my home state, I screamed. However, with a gasp, I saw a harrowing sight. Like clockwork, the carriage lowered itself, and there was Joe, who was yelling and looked to be about 95 years old, followed by Nick, who was 101 at best. Hudson followed suit, clocking in at least 97. The Ferris wheel. It must trap people and age them. How else could we all be this old? How long have we been on here? My old mind raced. Indubitably, I reached the bottom and was let out. The carnival was black, and there was no Carney, and there was no Ohio anymore. I woke up again to a knock on my door, and the last thing I remember was being greeted by my friends, who this time were all the same age as me. We agreed to get in the Ferris wheel again, after discussing that we had the same experience, though none of us seemed to remember each other. I looked away, and then I lost my place. Okay, we agreed to get in the Ferris wheel and see if we could figure out what is happening. This time, we all got in the same carriage, we spun to the top, everyone paid another $15, and the ride stopped. It was stuck there. Below us was nothing but pitch black nothingness. In the distance, there was a sign that read, "Welcome to the wheel." We all gasped, for now we were forever stuck in a time loop Ferris wheel. A missile came and hit the Ferris wheel. We all slowly watched as our lives flashed before our own eyes. Unfortunately, it was multiple heat-seeking missiles, and it targeted everyone. Everything blew up, and everyone died a horrible death. Hudson died the worst death. His arms were blown off, and his head was obliterated. Oh. Joe was nothing but a flaming speck in the ground, like those cartoons. Nick was nowhere to be seen. This concerned me. Besides me, as I am writing this story from my apartment in Detroit, Michigan, where I live in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for the day that carnival comes around and I can rescue my friends. One day.
Yeah. Goosebumps story.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, that one kept me on my toes as well.
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going with it, but time Ferris wheel.
Time Ferris wheel. I don't know. I figured since I play on the fact that we actually all will never go on a ride at a carnival.
Yeah. I really thought the horror and shock part was going to be that we lived in Ohio, and it was like, like the Twilight Zone. Like, everything's normal in Ohio?
No, that was just an added bonus. And then I lived in Detroit.
Pretty terrifying.
Dude, we could totally troll our viewers into thinking we live in Ohio. I don't know where we live.
True, we don't mention it.
That's actually funny. Or Detroit.
You don't know where we live, viewer.
I'll go see who that is. Huh. Well, that was concerning. That was the police. They said that the monster is on our street, and we have to stay inside for our own safety.
There's actually a monster?
Our street in Ohio?
So they say.
Well, does anyone have another story that they could tell us? We're hoping for the best.
I have a story, Hudson.
Oh.
The title of that story is The Specter's Reign. It was the first day of fall, and the leaves had begun to crumble and break. I watched a frail orange leaf fall slowly from a tree and onto my windshield. It was just after 11 a.m., and a ceiling of gray clouds separated the town from the sun above. Despite this, it was a fairly comfortable morning. As I drove home from therapy, I thought aimlessly of all the troubles that plagued me. I forced them out with my breath, and they clawed their way back in. I was driving on autopilot as I approached the stop sign. I saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. My speed slowly... My fault. My speed slowed increasingly as I approached the stop sign. I had plenty of time to stop, but I didn't. I felt a bump beneath my tires, and fear made my spine tingle. I did not stop or look back before I reached the stop sign and came to a full halt. "Come on, you gotta be kidding me," I said aloud, keeping my eyes firmly forward. At this point, I was breathing heavily. I had run something over. What had it been? Terrible images flooded my thoughts. I saw a broken skateboard and a big dent in the side of my leased car. I saw an old squirrel reduced to roadkill. I saw a yellow dog imprinted by my tire. I saw a young child who had simply strayed from the yard. Feeling as if I were about to throw up, I put the car in park and stepped out. My breathing was sharp and quick, and I could feel sweat coating my palms. I closed my eyes and tried to ground myself. Perhaps I had imagined the whole thing. But no, I knew this wasn't true. I had seen movement, and I had felt an impact. I walked slowly to the back of my car, steadying myself against it. I prepared myself as best I could for every possibility. I held my breath, and like ripping off a Band-Aid, I stuck my head out to see what lay behind my vehicle. It was nothing. This couldn't be right. I got to my knees and looked beneath the car. I saw nothing. I trailed back to where I had felt the impact and looked around. There was nothing to be seen. I looked for bloodstains, dents, damage, any sign of the impact. No evidence. I felt relieved, but only for a moment. Then I felt puzzled and concerned. I knew I had hit something. I saw it and I felt it. What had I hit? I got in the car anyway, and I drove. Not 2 minutes later, I saw another movement on the opposite side of the street. I came to a hard stop this time and looked. There was a handsome black cat, fur darker than the night sky and eyes more yellow than the moon. I frowned at the omen, then watched as it took 2 steps forwards and turned into the wind. Moments later, there it was again on the other side of the street. The cat followed me home. For weeks, everywhere I turned, I saw the cat. It was like my shadow, except that no one else could see it. We were connected. I got used to it soon enough. November was coming around, and it would soon be time to vote for local elections. For the very first time, our town was to elect a mayor this term. There were 2 candidates. One was strongly Democratic, and the other was just as strongly Republican. As an independent voter, this made things complicated. "Who are you going to vote for, Hudson?" I asked my like-minded friend. "I don't know yet. Do you?" Hudson was also an independent voter, and we both had a habit of saving our research until the last minute before we chose who to vote for. I told him, "Not sure. I'm not happy with either of these candidates, really. I mean, this will be the first time that a single person represents our town. It's a big deal." "Well, you know who I'm voting for," Katrina chided. "And if you guys were smart, you would vote the same way." Yeah, whatever. Frickin' lib." I shook my head. "You know, I bet I'd make a fine mayor. I'm a reasonable guy, unbound by conventional political bias." Katrina laughed in a mean way. "You would be a terrible politician." "Screw you, I would be good. You'd vote for me, right, Hudson?" "Definitely," he cheered. "Easier to vote for a guy that you trust than someone who you've never even met." "Sound logic by my judgment," I shrugged and shook his hand. Katrina scowled. "Joe, tell them he would be a terrible politician. I am too tired for this." Joe scratched his chin. "Well, I don't often agree with those two, but I must say, he might be onto something here." "What?" She rubbed her forehead with the palm of her hand. "Yeah, I mean, in actual politics, he would be a liability, no doubt. But we are only electing a mayor, and there is no standard set so far. All we need is someone reasonable who will do what is best for the town. Plus, he can just run everything by us so that we don't let anything excessively stupid slip out." "Exactly," I agreed. "I won't need to negotiate for the safety of the nation or anything. Although I'm sure I could do so if I had to." "Stop," Katrina demanded. "Do not try to run for mayor. You'll only pull votes from the candidates that deserve them." "Oh, don't worry about that," I grinned. "I've just thought of an excellent plan." There was just over a week left before voting day. I appointed Joe as my campaign manager, and he spread the word far and wide. This was just for show, really, to lessen the shock of my inevitable win. The evening before the votes were to be counted, were you sitting outside the town hall, you would have seen Hudson nervously hobble over to the absentee ballot deposit box, holding a bag containing 20,000 absentee ballots with my name on them. You then would have seen him insert them each into the box, individually, dropping one on occasion due to sweat, a result of combined anxiety and the labor of carrying the very heavy bag. Of course, no one was outside of the town hall that night, and no one saw him. The next evening, I was named mayor. I shook the hand of each town council member and received the ceremonial key to the city. I was a beacon of hope that our home needed so desperately. I was the shining sun. I assembled a council of wise political advisors: Joe, Hudson, James, and my buddy Chris from the Postal Service. Despite her opposing my election, I still allowed Katrina to serve on my advisory council. Our first meeting went smoothly, as we discussed goals. Due to the fact that there had never been a mayor before, there were no checks and balances in place. Thus, I didn't need to run anything by the town council before I finalized it. This is where the advisory council came into play. I think it could use a super tall slide, Hudson said, adjusting his glasses. No, you're right. We can arrange to put that in right next to the new in-ground skate park. That way, kids can skateboard down the slide and into the half-pipe if they want, I stated. Joe and Hudson nodded in agreement. How's the homeless population faring? It's doing good, Nick, Chris assured me. Homelessness in our town was pretty low to start, but it's down to single digits now. Excellent. This is great, but we can do better. I want no homelessness. James, any ideas? Well, he cleared his throat. I think everyone should have a home. Why don't we just build a house for each homeless person and give it to them for free? We all clapped, except for Katrina. You're a genius, my friend. Your seat on this council is well deserved. I made a few notes. What are the school system's performance? Joe inquired. I replied, according to my records, we are the third-ranked system in the state currently. That makes us the second loser, effectively. We've all seen Talladega Nights. There were nods around the room. I suggest that we simply require that each student's scores be raised one letter grade at the conclusion of each quarter. Any student who already has an A+ will receive $100 cash as compensation for their exemplary work. Are there any objections? Great idea, James exclaimed. Everyone shook their heads, but Katrina spoke up. Wait, you can't seriously— Boo! Boo! The remainder of the council booed her viciously. They resented her for holding a seat on the council, even though she did not contribute to my campaign, and rather actively opposed it. Her words were often met this way. I did not boo, however. I was not as petty as that. Silence, my friends. Let her speak. They obeyed reluctantly. What the heck, James? She scolded her younger brother. Sorry, he breathed nervously, looking down at the table. Mob mentality got the better of me. He seemed apologetic, but this did not stop him from booing her during the next council meeting. Ignoring him, Katrina turned to me. You can't seriously think that rigging the grades of everyone in the school system is the most effective way to improve our ranking. I'm pretty confident that it is the most effective way, actually. You have to make actual changes to the curriculum. They won't get smarter by rigging their grades. I disagree. $100 is a ton of money to a student. By rewarding A+ students with cash, it will encourage every student to strive for an A+ grade without any tampering. It's surefire logic, Joe agreed. Chris was nodding gleefully. Excellent, I smiled. Then I believe that will conclude this meeting. I slammed my gavel and the meeting was adjourned. Everyone shook hands and chattered as they left. Last in the room were myself and the black cat that sat across the table from me. Have you any wisdom? I asked it. It smiled and disappeared. I nodded. Figures. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last. To everyone's surprise, it was less than a month before I proved to be a less than ideal mayor. The town was quickly swimming in debt. Drowning would be a better term, actually. While I was initially very well received as mayor, the people's faith quickly dwindled. They began talking, and they realized that practically none of them had actually voted for me. Tension rose in the town. There were riots calling for my removal from office. I stopped leaving the office at all, instead, for fear of my safety. I was the clouds that submerged the town in darkness. The stress got to me, and I disbanded my advisory council in a fit of rage. I confined myself to my office, just me and the cat. I paced anxiously as it watched. I felt its yellow eyes glaring into me. I stopped. What? I asked. It said nothing. I sighed. Governing is so much harder than I thought. What should I do? It was a rhetorical question, but to my horror, it evoked an answer. Make a deal with me, the cat spoke, its voice deep and dark. I stared at it in awe. You carelessly took my life, and now my spirit is without a vessel. Let me share yours, and I will make all of your problems go away. Make them go away, huh? I scratched my chin. Does that mean you know how to solve them? Or does that just mean you're going to kill me or something? I have the answers that you seek. I was once the well-respected leader of an ancient cat civilization far larger than the community that you govern. No way, really? Yep. That's sick. So you totally know all the tricks of politics and stuff. Correct. Yeah, all right. We can make a deal. If we share a body, though, who's in control? Do we split it? I'm not sure, to be honest. I've never shared a body before. Oh. All right. It will be a learning experience for both of us, I suppose. Let's try it. The cat nodded, ducked its head, and leapt towards my body. Instead of crashing into my chest, it simply slipped inside of me. I screamed in pain as my body tried to reject the admittance of the additional soul. I clutched my chest, heart racing, and fell to my knees. My eyes turned bright yellow, and dark blood drizzled down my face from their sockets. While my body was agitated and dripping with sweat, my consciousness faded. The cat laughed deeply, using my body as it lay on the floor in a pool of blood and sweat. Sorry, kid. Looks like I am the one in control after all. The next day, the town council was removed from power, and the next term's election was permanently suspended. Prisoners were released and recruited to form the mayor's personal army. Anyone with complaints from this point on was simply arrested. People lived in fear, but they did so quietly. The spirit really had made my problems go away. The town felt cold under the spirit's rule. Guards patrolled every block of the town, food purchases were limited, and school was mandatory attendance. After school or work, people were to return immediately to their homes. No one was to wander the town anymore. As such, it was very noticeable when the members of my old advisory council came strolling up to the front door of the town hall near the end of November. It was an especially chilly day. Snow was falling for the first time that year. It was the type of snow that is so light and sparse that it could be mistaken for ashes from a distant fire. The council had one other person with them, a figure in a tall, dark trench coat. He strongly resembled the stranger from my final comics project of the previous year. The guards stopped them. They faced them boldly. Let us pass, Joe demanded. The guards only chuckled, then attacked. Joe and Hudson quickly unsheathed their swords, which they wore on their backs, and engaged the guards in combat. The others took this opportunity to burst through the door. They made a beeline for my office, but were cut off by another swarm of guards. I've got this one, Chris declared, panting. My knees can't take much more running anyways. He pulled a pair of red nunchucks from his back pocket. I'll stay and help Chris, James decided. There are too many for him to fight alone. We will catch up with you. He pulled a baseball bat out from underneath his jacket. Katrina and the stranger heard the sound of blows landing behind them as they approached my office. Together, they kicked down the door. That wasn't locked, you know, the spirit within my body informed them. Nick, are you still in there? Katrina called to me. Don't worry. Your friend wanted this. We made an arrangement. The spirit's deep voice echoed. I see that you came armed, it said, gesturing to the nightstick in Katrina's hand. Surely you don't intend to harm your friend's body. She was conflicted, but the stranger sprung into action. The two exchanged blows, matching each other nearly equally. They moved fast and hit hard, each drawing blood and grunts from the other. They grappled each other into a stalemate before Katrina seized the opportunity and hit the back of my leg with a nightstick. My body folded like a chair and collapsed onto the ground. The stranger took this opportunity to produce a pendant from his jacket pocket and force it into my chest with an open palm. He began muttering, and the spirit began to holler, Exorcist! I should have known! Stop this! We made a deal! The stranger continued. When he finished muttering, he hollered at the top of his lungs, Be gone! The room turned frigid and still as the spirit left my body with a hissing noise, taking the shape of a warm breath amongst the cold air. I woke up slowly. Whoa. I looked around. The others entered the room at this point. Using context clues, I formed a theory. That cat spirit was totally evil, huh? Yes, it definitely was, Katrina confirmed. Do you see a lot of animal spirits that we don't see? Joe asked. I ignored the question, instead turning my gaze to the stranger. Who is this guy? He smiled. I'm glad you're all right. I am you, from an alternate timeline. I am also a monster hunter / exorcist. That's so sick, I breathed in awe. So, did you exorcise me, or whatever? Yeah, man. Thanks, dude. I owe you one. Thanks, all of you. Chris shrugged, and Hudson grinned. James said, well, I was in the neighborhood, so. Katrina glared at me, shrugging. I admitted, so, I'm not a great mayor. Whatever. At least I tried. The next day, I reinstated the town council and resigned from my position as mayor. The council then quickly voted to remove the position of mayor once again. My reign as the first and only mayor lasted 1 month. A short term for any position, and yet it was unfortunately enough to ruin any chances I had of a successful political career. Governing is truly a thankless job.
Good story.
I did not know what to expect of what that was gonna be. That was awesome, though.
Thank you.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. That was so funny. Dude, I think my favorite description you gave was when the spirit left your body as a warm breath in a cold room.
Yeah, that's
Because that was
really nice.
sick.
Thank you.
That made me think of the Lich.
Big
Gravity
nice.
Falls.
My favorite part was the council meeting, personally.
Katrina did not like the council meeting. She was
You
very
fucking bitch.
upset.
I knew you wouldn't like the council
Yeah.
meeting.
You would have booed me just with everyone else.
Well, this entire story was based off when I made a joke that I should run for whatever position it was the other day when we were driving to Vermont, and you reacted basically exactly like
Yeah,
that.
you wouldn't be a good politician.
Screw you!
Viewers, believe everything you hear.
The whole story was true, viewer.
Was that the monster? It sounds like it's breaking in. We have to fight it. Happy Halloween! Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Happy Halloween!